What if Veritone stock is one of those small AI stocks that nobody is paying enough attention to right now? VERI is trading around the $1.30 area, and that immediately raises three big questions. Can Veritone reach $5? Can it reach $10? And is the $20 target completely crazy? Honestly, when you look at the current stock price, $20 sounds almost impossible. But the interesting thing about small-cap AI stocks is that you don't need the company to become the next NVIDIA for the stock to make a very big move. You just need the business to grow faster than investors expect. And that's exactly what makes Veritone interesting. The company is targeting between $130 million and $145 million in revenue for 2026. That's a significant increase compared with the roughly $92.6 million also generated in 2025. So we're talking about potentially very strong year-over-year growth. But there's another number that caught my attention. Veritone says its data refinery qualified bookings and near-term pipeline were above 68 million. Now I want to be clear. A pipeline is not the same thing as revenue. This money isn't automatically going into Veritone's bank account. The company still has to convert those opportunities into actual contracts and revenue. But if it can do that consistently, the market could start looking at VERI very differently. And that's where the bull case begins. However, there's a major problem. Veritone is still losing money. The company reported a significant net loss in the first quarter. So investors can't simply look at revenue growth and assume everything is fine. The real question is whether Veritone can grow while also getting closer to profitability, because that's what could ultimately determine the stock's valuation. Now let's talk about $5. At around $1.30, reaching $5 would require the stock to gain almost 4 times from current levels. That's obviously a big move. But compared with $10 or $20, I think $5 is the first target that investors can realistically start discussing. If revenue continues growing, data refinery gains traction, and the company's financial position improves, I think $5 becomes a much more interesting possibility. But here's where things get really difficult. Getting to $5 is one challenge. Getting from $5 to $10 requires the market to believe Veritone can become a much larger AI business. And that brings us to the part of this story that many investors might be overlooking, because even if the business grows, there is another risk that could affect shareholders, and that's dilution. If Veritone needs additional capital and issues more shares, existing shareholders could own a smaller percentage of the company. So when I look at VERI, I don't just ask where the stock price could go, I ask how the business itself is performing. So let's continue with the big question. Can Veritone actually reach $10? In my opinion, yes, it's possible, but I wouldn't call it the base case right now. For VERI to reach $10, I think investors would need to see several things happen at the same time. Revenue would need to keep growing. Data refinery would need to become a meaningful part of the business. Margins would need to improve, and most importantly, investors would need to see a much clearer path toward profitability, because the market can get excited about AI, but eventually the numbers have to prove the story. That's why I would personally watch a few things every quarter. Revenue growth, cash flow, operating expenses, data refinery bookings, and whether the company's losses are getting smaller. If those numbers start moving in the right direction, the valuation could change very quickly. Now let's talk about the $20 target. This is where I think investors need to be realistic. Could VERI reach $20? I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would consider it an extreme bull case scenario. For that to happen, Veritone would probably need years of strong execution. We're talking about much higher revenue, better margins, stronger cash generation, successful AI commercialization, and significantly greater investor confidence. So personally, I wouldn't buy VERI simply because somebody says it can reach $20. My base case is much more conservative. If the company executes well, I think the $3 to $5 range is a reasonable first milestone to watch. My bullish scenario would be around $7 to $10 if data refinery scales successfully and Veritone gets much closer to sustainable profitability. And then there's the moonshot scenario, $20. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I would treat it as a long-term possibility rather than a realistic, near-term target. And here's the twist. I don't think the most important question is actually whether VERI can reach $20. The real question is, can Veritone prove that its AI business can generate sustainable, recurring revenue? Because if the answer is yes, investors may start valuing the company based on what it could become rather than what it is today. But if growth disappoints, the stock could remain under pressure. That's why I'm watching execution more than hype. So now I want to know what you think. Where do you see VERI going? 5, 10, or do you think this stock could eventually reach $20? Drop your price target in the comments. And if you want more small cap AI stock predictions, market analysis, and realistic bull and bear scenarios, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes the biggest opportunities aren't the stocks everybody is already talking about. Sometimes they're the ones nobody is watching yet.